Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Legionaries of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Starcrest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today, we are on day 297, and we're covering Gaudium et Spes 4 on scrutinizing the signs of the times. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday, we mentioned how new technology can be good, but we remain the same humans who must be brought up to our dignity. Today, after the preface, we're going to start what the text calls an introductory statement of men in the modern world. That's an interesting title, but it's kind of describing how we are in the modern world in 1960s. And even a lot of this applies to today. The summary of today is we need to present the gospel anew after looking at the signs of the times and some of those signs. List some of those signs. So, paragraph 4, which is our topic today, has 5 subparagraphs, which we'll read in 4 parts. 4a, we present the gospel anew after looking at signs. This is probably the most important subparagraph here because this one is the thematic one for the next few days. Then B and C, they talk about technology has caused culture and societal change. 4D, we have many great things, but often only for some. We don't share the good things we have. And then E, this complex world means man can lose track of values. We can lose track of the important values in life. So let's go straight into 4a. To carry out such a task, the Church has always had the duty of scrutinizing the signs of the times and of interpreting them in light of the gospel. Thus, in a language intelligible to each generation, she can respond to the perennial questions which man asked about the present life and the life to come, and about the relationship of the one to the other. We must therefore recognize and understand the world in which we live, its explanations, its longings, and its often dramatic characteristics. Some of the main features of the modern world can be sketched as follows. This paragraph has 4 sentences, and those first 2 are absolute bangers. Those first 2 are really the thematic for this whole section, and a really important thing for how we deal with the world outside the church today. So, the first sentence talks about the need to scrutinize the signs of the times. We need to scrutinize this world in which we live. Scrutinize and see, okay, how are people dealing with social media? What kind of things is technology causing? For example, today, what can we do about sports betting and the societal problems that's causing? Because that's a very new problem that's really expanded with these online sports things that could be in your phone or your pocket. And this isn't analyzing the signs of time for itself. We're analyzing the signs of time for some reason, for some end. We analyze the signs of time in light of the gospel. Why? Because the gospel is the lens through which we see the whole world. That is what it means to be a Catholic, what it means to be a Christian. So looking at at all these signs in this light, we then think of various things like pastoral initiatives or new words or new modes of expressing the truth of the gospel. And this really brings us to the second sentence, which is also a really good one. We need to present the gospel anew in a new language. Personally, when I look at a lot of my posting online, a lot of my posting on X/Twitter, whatever you want to call it, I think of this as a kind of motto for what I'm doing. I look at it and I say, okay, how am I presenting the gospel anew in a language that will match in a way that will be understood by the people here? I still have the gospel, I still have the core that is Jesus, but I need to present it to them. And we can look at many examples in history. One I like to think about is Beowulf. Beowulf is the earliest large Anglo-Saxon epic. It's a great book, honestly one of my favorite fictional works. But the idea of Beowulf is that Beowulf is this clan leader, this noble warrior But Beowulf is also Jesus, and it's presenting Jesus to the society that is barely Christianized from a kind of barbarian warrior culture. And what is the goal of this? The goal of this is to lead them to the resurrection. It's about this life. It's about the life to come. It's about the connection between them. What are those things about? That's about how we can live this life so that we can be with Jesus in the resurrection. Now, the last two sentences aren't as dramatic. The third one, we need to recognize the world in which we live. The world today is often dramatically different from the past. There are just things about how society is organized today that are different from 1960, and that kind of industrialized society of 1960 different from 1660 dramatically again. So these are the kinds of things we have to recognize because how we live is going to be different in those different societies. Then the last sentence here just says, hey, the rest of this section is going to list out certain characteristics of the modern world, which can be signs. Moving on to 4B and C. It talks about how technology has caused cultural and societal change. I think we all recognize that, but it's important to think of how the fathers of the Vatican II were thinking about it in 1965, and then how we can apply it today, because technology has obviously changed since 1965. So let's get into reading it. B. Today, the human race is involved in a new stage of history. Profound and rapid changes are spreading by degrees around the whole world. Triggered by the intelligence and creative energies of man, these changes recoil upon him, upon his decisions and desires, both individual and the collective, and upon his manner of thinking and acting with respect to the things and to people. Hence, we can already speak of a true cultural and societal transformation, one which has repercussions on man's religious life as well. C. As happens in any crisis of growth, this transformation has brought serious difficulties in its wake. Thus, while man extends his power in every direction, he does not always succeed in subjecting it to his own welfare. Striving to probe more profoundly into the deeper recesses of his own mind, he frequently appears more unsure of himself. Gradually and more precisely, he lays bare the laws of society, only to be paralyzed by uncertainty about the direction to give it. These two subparagraphs are talking about the new history in the 20th century. We have a new period of history, because we have this age of technology, this age of industrialization, even our own lives further. Back in that day, they might have talked about it as the atomic age. Today, something like age of the internet or techno age would be more the term, because the internet has affected the average person's life more than the atomic bomb, which I don't know if they thought about that in the 1960s. But this kind of industrialization and urbanization and those kind of effects have continued on from the 1960s. And there's a lot of change. There's dramatically different society. You look back to things that were happening in the 1800s, and it's such a different society. And we have to realize that these new technologies are causing cultural changes. We think differently. For example, I can get a photo of my nephew every day if my sister wants to send me one. I can communicate with thousands of people every day on the internet. People think about how their lives are going to be about on the internet. Now there's certain anxiety about how your image is on the internet, much more and much different than the anxiety that has always been in humans about how their image is going to be in their town or village or whatever. And these new ways of thinking are going to affect religion, because religion, although it starts with God, it starts with his movement towards us, the Catholic religion. Religion of itself is lived out in the concrete reality of a particular society. Different societies in Christendom have had different feast days that they celebrate bigger. Obviously, for us as Christians, Christmas and Easter are the two biggest feast days. But after that, it varies quite a bit by Catholic culture. And how they celebrate them are different. Obviously, the Mass is the same. But outside of the Mass, there's a whole lot of things that are different. If you look at a German Christmas celebration and a Southern Italian Christmas celebration. And amidst all these changes, we have new difficulties. We have new challenges. There is new power, but it's not always for the best. We are paralyzed by this kind of decision fatigue. A lot of times, one thing that can help our mental health today is just to say, look, we're just going to have one choice, and we're not going to have 100 choices of what kind of ice cream to eat. Because you can get that decision fatigue there. We are less sure of ourselves. We look at our society, there's more anxiety, more stress. How much that is caused by our lack of certainty about ourselves. And this is a reality that we live in this modern world, this modern technology. Moving on to 4D. The summary is we have many great things, but often those things are only for some people. Let's read it. Never has the human race enjoyed such an abundance of wealth, resources, and economic power. And yet, a huge portion of the world's citizens are still tormented by hunger and poverty, while countless numbers suffer from total illiteracy. Never before has man had so keen an understanding of freedom. Yet at the same time, new forms of social and psychological slavery make their appearance. Although the world today has a very vivid awareness of its unity and of how one man depends on another in needful solidarity, it is more grievously torn into opposing camps by conflicting forces. For political, social, economic, racial, and ideological disputes still continue bitterly, and with them the peril of war, which would reduce everything to ashes. True, there is a growing exchange of ideas, but the very words by which key concepts are expressed take on quite different meanings in diverse ideological systems. Finally, man painstakingly searches for a better world without a corresponding spiritual advancement. We live in this world where there is such this dichotomy, where we have such riches, we have such wonderful things, and yet not everyone has them. This is a real challenge that this paragraph, or this subparagraph, is talking about. We have so much wealth, so much food, yet we have people dying of hunger. Recently, in the last decade or so, we finally have in the world where more people are suffering from obesity than from hunger, which is a good thing. And we also have new forms of oppression. Look at how society was at this time. We had the communist world for a good portion of the world. Even today, we have new forms of oppression in situations where, like China and North Korea, but also situations where you can't speak out, where free speech is really restricted in ways that are not really just. And we still have lots of divisions. One of the things here is how it's grievously torn into opposing camps by conflicting forces. And I can think of our political discourse today in the United States as some aspects of that. Obviously, it's not divided in the sense of violence or war, but there is a very strong division in the political discourse in the U.S. And finally, this subparagraph talks about the challenge of only seeking the human good. We need to seek spiritual good as well. There are plenty of people who do good things for the poor to physically help them get them out of poverty and things like that. I know someone who is non-religious who does a lot of things like that. We might consider charity or development or things like that. A good person, but they don't have any spiritual meaning. They're just, let's get these people clean water. Let's get them a roof over their head or things like that. We need to seek spiritual good, not just this physical good. Finally, subparagraph 4E talks about how this complex world means we can lose track of values. Let's read it. Influenced by such a variety of complexities, many of our contemporaries are kept from accurately identifying permanent values and adjusting them properly to fresh discoveries. As a result, buffeted between hope and anxiety, and pressing one another with questions about our present course of events, they are burdened down with uneasiness. The same course of events leads men to look for answers. Indeed, it forced them to do so. Here, in this subparagraph, we look at that issue of the complex world where we can lose a sense of values. Oftentimes, when we have that simpler life, it is easier to see the values of life. It is easier to see the values of community, of friendship, of things like that. And here we can lose those values. We can have values that are just passing rather than the eternal values. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge with society in general, a challenge even inside the church. Sometimes people have a temptation to do something where they just put a temporary value above a permanent one. And the rapid advancement of technology perpetuates this. Today, we have short-form content, things like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, etc. And those type of short-form half a minute to a minute videos can create this kind of idea that losing a sense of values. And it's important to stop and think and consider what our values are and what the kind of media we consume is and how that is affecting our values. So thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast, and you can donate to help StarQuest produce it and other great podcasts. And you can do that at sqpn.com/give. You can give one time, monthly, or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we're going to continue with the next paragraphs of Gaudium et Spes. That is paragraphs 5 and 6, and we have so many technological advances. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which can provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information on the podcast, like playlists for individual documents and a reading plan, go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X.
Amen.